Decorating Pages is a podcast dedicated to taking you behind the scenes of the designs of your favorite TV shows and films. Each episode, I'll be sharing design stories from some of Hollywood's most famous sets. Interviews from set decorators, production designers, directors, and actors about creating the look of TV and film, about their design inspirations, and stories that take sets from page to screen. Hello, and welcome to Decorating Pages. I'm your host, Kim Wanup. I think I'm at week 12 of COVID, and I don't know. I'm going to get through this intro quick because this interview with Cory Lorenzen, production designer, is really good, and I want to get to it. First off, just to address what is all happening to us throughout this country, I live in LA. I live 2 blocks away from the intersection of 3rd and Fairfax of the Farmers Market, the Grove, where there was a protest and it was turned into a standoff with police and vehicles were trashed and burned, and it was next to my favorite wine bar, which was super scary that was going to go down, the blending lab. But frightening is not the word that I could say because, you know, this is happening 2 blocks away and I have twins napping in the next room. So there's just been a lot of emotions going on this week, I think, for everyone. And I think all emotions are justified in this. I feel so much sorrow for George Floyd's daughter and his mother and his family, and I don't even know them. And then personally, I feel bad for the small business owners who have gone through a lot in my neighborhood. I know a lot of them on 3rd Street, and I just feel bad that all around there is just so much disrespect and anger in this world. And I don't know, I really try not to get political on this podcast because we all get enough of that. And I want this to be an escape, but I do want to comment that none of this behavior is tolerable and actions have consequences. And that's what I'm going to teach my children. I'm going to teach them love and kindness and compassion, and that's what I'm going to start with because I don't know how to solve this. I hope that all of you are safe and healthy and doing well. In this episode, I speak with my friend production designer Cory Lorenzen. He is pretty busy during this pandemic because not only is he currently the production designer of the Goldbergs and Schooled, he also is an entertainment designer for companies like Universal, Nickelodeon, and others. And what that means is he creates interactive theme park vignettes, or some themed stores that are in the parks, or even floats for the Disney parade for Disneyland. That is such a cool job. And somehow he juggles it all. I met Cory in 2005 on the film Fanboys, which didn't even come out till 2 reshoots later in 2009. He hired me for the film, and which was shot in Albuquerque. And unfortunately, that's the only time that we've ever worked together. We had one small little project, but other than that, your schedules just don't line up. It sucks. Fanboys was just the weirdest experience of good and awful, which I know a lot of people have had in this industry. You're going to hear all about it. But at least I made a good friend out of it. He's just a terrific guy. Starting his career with the indie hit Napoleon Dynamite. Let me just repeat that. He started his career on Napoleon Dynamite. Hello. He's been designing films and TV shows like Greek, The Paul Reiser Show, Breaking In, Web Therapy, and of course the 2 period hits, The Goldbergs and Schooled. We recorded this mid-April, so keep that in mind. He's just such a good guy, so talented. So I hope you enjoy. Were you on, was Goldberg shooting when this all happened? Did you go down?
Yeah, so we were prepping the final episode, and we were one of the last studios to shut down. So we were probably one of the last TV shows to shut down. We kind of held on there for another week or so beyond what most other shows did, at least as far as what we could read in the media.
Were they trying to kill you?
Yeah, well, so both of our stories, and I say both our stories because Goldbergs and School are the two shows that I design. And so both of those were coming into the final episodes, and both of them were slightly pivotal to, the next season's setups.
Mm.
And so there was a bit of a shift, like, how do we resolve these storylines an episode early when we're basically halfway done with the episode, the second to last episode.
Right.
So I think there's a bit like, is this thing real? Do we need to hold out a bit longer? Can we squeeze out one more week? And I think there's a bit of realization that kind of came to Sony saying, okay, we need to shut down. Everybody else is sort of the last guys kind of holding out here. So they shut us down with that last episode missing from each show.
Oh, wow.
And I saw the final cuts on those, and through kind of some creative voiceovering, it looks like they did, and a little bit of, because our shows are both narrated, so they get a little bit of leeway in their storytelling.
Right.
It seems like they were able to kind of resolve some of those missing issues that would exist if we had just dropped both of those season finales.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good. I mean, I gotta say, I've watched the Goldbergs since the beginning. I gave up this season. I know. I love it, but I gave up.
No, if we're losing the hometown Philly audience, then what are we even doing this for then?
Well, listen, I have voiced my concern since the very beginning that they don't have Philly accents. This is you could have every John.
But who's gonna watch? Honestly, though,
me.
As a local, who's gonna watch that though?
Locally?
Okay,
no, I think people watch. No. Back there, people watched it. But I know people who watch it back there. My parents love it.
Is there gripe that there's no accents? That's the thing. Who wants to listen to a bunch of Philly accents for?
Hey. Yeah, it's just me. I think it's just me. But the whole thing is that little kid has like a Midwestern accent. They didn't even try to get rid of his dialect at all. That's like insulting. Okay? That's not even right.
You can only do so much.
Yeah. I mean, you nail the reason why I watch every episode is because you guys do such a fantastic job of like not only capturing the error, but really capturing like minute details from like Philly. And I know that's because the creator writer is from Philly and of that time, and I'm sure painstakingly and probably annoyingly giving you notes of like, no, it's not the color red on Wawa, but it makes for fantastic TV for me.
Well, good. I'm glad that you appreciate it, especially someone that's local, because we try to hit all those kind of important elements that make it feel real, make it feel like it's actually taking place there. It's hard to do on this style of show and kind of this half-hour comedic episodic show that's shot in Los Angeles. So we do things quickly and we do things for a certain price, but we always try to do our version, whether it's the Wawa or whatever, that's real. Always try to get as much of that reality as we can in there. So hopefully it's enough to make people feel it.
Oh, definitely, because it's not all dialogue. There's so many little things in there, like in the set dressing and the sets and like even like the signage and everything that you guys have done to make that so Philly. I love it. I'm telling you, that's why I watch it. So
awesome. All right. Well, this last year we failed you. So
yeah, you failed. But yeah, I got a lot.
I'll see where things went wrong. Things went off the rails a while ago. I'm not sure where.
Well, here. All right. You want to go deep? I just don't get like she went to college. Go to college. Like, I don't know. It just go away and then only come back for 1 or 2 episodes. It was like every episode was like, oh, Mom trying to get me back. All right, I'm coming back. And then I don't know. I was like, this is too repetitive. I gotta give up. I gave up on Modern Family like 2 years ago. That was a long haul. I finally gave up at the end.
Sure, I got you. And I'd probably be speaking a bit without knowing the nitty-gritty of it. I'm sure there are other considerations on a show like this beyond narrative storytelling. I'm sure there's contractual obligations. I'm sure there's other reasons why things are the way they are at certain points. Yeah. Especially on a show that's been running for a long time this. To where maybe the initial narrative setup may have been, I anticipate this going 5 years, I anticipate this going 6 years, and because it's been so successful.
But that's what happens with
brings the need for so much more narrative to be stretched out, perhaps.
Yeah, but that's what happens with all the shows. Look, Modern Family had to add kids. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And then they have grandkids,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
and working with kids is the worst.
Yeah, at a certain point, you're just, enough's enough.
Yeah, and then they grow up, and, you know, you hope, I'm sure as a producer, you're like, oh my God, just stay cute. Just please stay cute. And then these poor kids have to go through, like, puberty during shooting. Like, it's a sin. That's a sin.
Yeah, I think at the very least, I think the Goldbergs, the growing up on the Goldbergs has been fairly graceful.
Yeah.
Without too much awkwardness, and a bit of the awkwardness was played into the story of what was happening on the show.
Yeah,
I think,
it's good.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good effect there.
I wanted to ask you, you basically live in the 80s and then now the 90s with Schooled. I mean, you're just like living in your childhood basically and constantly reminiscing of things. You like that? How is that?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because, I think those shows are pretty successful due to nostalgia. It's kind of this undefinable feeling or sensation that we all have because of certain situations we're in our lives, and things come back in memories, and I think it's a pretty powerful emotion that both of these shows have tapped into. And so when I started both these shows, I'm about the same age as Adam Goldberg, and some of those same experiences and
me.
And memories, that we've gone through this whole time. So I think initially it was pretty overwhelming to try to replicate essentially an emotion, right? Like I'm trying to replicate a feeling for things, because I could look at certain of these objects or the music or the toys or the fashion and have these kind of nostalgic feels for it, but it doesn't quite hit you the same way you remember it hitting you necessarily. But I think that's what you're trying to design to. You're trying to design to that emotion. So initially it was a bit overwhelming and a bit like really digging into it. Now that we're so many years later, a bit of the nostalgia has worn off. Personally, as somebody who's trying to design those looks, it is more about like how do we hit those emotional.
I think that's a great point
of each of these.
I think that's a super great point, because it isn't always exactly how you remembered it, but what were you feeling when you heard that song, or when you were in high school and this situation happened to you too, and you're designing for that, really.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's not the I'm trying to figure out a good way to describe it. It's not necessarily, if you look at it as a whole, like each little piece of nuance might not be right, but as a whole, how does this make you feel? How does this make you remember? How does this set a tone for the story that's happening? And one of the things that we try to do with the design, like every designer, is not let what the design is, especially on something that's really kind of design-centric, not stand in the way of the story. And I think with something like the 80s or the 90s, because those are pretty intense, periods of design.
I think the 90s is hard, though. I actually think doing 90s is hard because it's not good.
90s has been harder than... Yeah, a lot of people argue that the 80s, the 80s was a real...
But it's distinct.
Most of the stuff on the Goldbergs is actually from the... Yeah, most of the stuff from the Goldbergs is actually from the 70s.
Yes.
That's how... people don't live in the now. People live in the past 10 years kind of constantly. So we're able to mute out and kind of tone down a bit of the Goldberg stuff and really have like that kind of spastic 80s contemporary design be used more as an accent in it. To me, the 90s, especially the late 90s, like that, like in my mind, is still so current, even though we're over 20 years ago. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
In the 90s, but the 90s is where things, it's still recent enough to where we could look back on it and say, that wasn't good. We haven't gone through enough of a, there hasn't been enough time passed to really appreciate what it was, especially like graphically.
Yeah.
So much of what we do in that era is with the graphics, and it's this really, it's easy to do bad versions of what the 90s is right now, I think, and so it's a bit harder for us to really do the good, authentic-looking design kind of across the board, which I think we do very well. It's just a bit harder. It takes a bit more effort to do.
Well, yeah,
we're not kind of falling into what cliches are of that era.
Yeah, the wood, the pine, the overdone florals, the like Laura Ashley. Like you could get into so many little pockets of what the 90s was, but then there was those bright colors, and then there was like the minimalist of like black and white. Like it was so all over the place that I think the 90s is really hard to pin down.
It is. I mean, part of my research was looking into what was successful about the 90s in television. I looked at sets like Frasier,
right,
which is incredibly understated and also very elegant.
Mm-hmm.
But I looked at like color combinations, palettes, types of wood grains that are popular in certain eras. There's a big difference between the type of wood we appreciated living with in the 80s versus the 90s. And it's a pretty big difference between them. Those trends and those styles, fluctuate. And so I was looking at kind of what are the contrasts between the Goldbergs world and the Schooled world. We needed to make them look like they're both in different eras. But also one of the interesting things about designing in period is that design trends don't follow 10-year increments.
Right.
It's really hard to say something was the 80s when it was popular between 87 and 97.
Yeah.
Or something was 80s when it was popular between 72 and 84. So just because it's easy for us as humans to kind of compartmentalize things in these 10-year chunks, by no means did we live in 10-year chunks. By no means did we say, oh, it's 1990, time to change the aesthetic. Mm-hmm. So things are much more fluid than I think we like to compartmentalize them as far as design aesthetics go.
Well, I think, I mean, those two shows, I think you've nailed it. I mean, and I think it working so much probably with wardrobe and the overlap of that because your period, I mean, I think you've nailed it on the shows.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's awesome. We were able to work a lot with our costume designer, who's amazing on both the shows, setting up graphics and designs for almost every, uniform or graphic kind of element that needs to be crossed between the two. We're always really kind of aware of what each other's doing because the wardrobe on both those shows can be potentially, very out there.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that there's kind of a cohesion between what those actors are wearing and where they are environmentally. So, trying to make sure those works. That could be an opportunity for a lot of clashing in a very unpleasant way if there isn't a lot of coordination there. So, fortunately, we've got a good relationship to make sure we're working together on that.
And your shit has to be funny. I mean, I think that was one of the things when I started Parks of like being super scared that, oh my God, is my dressing funny? Like, is this chair funny?
Yeah.
Like, is the dressing part of the joke? Which a lot in Parks, we evolved a lot of that into like this, the set was part of the joke or something. So there is that thing in comedy where you have a little bit of leeway, but you don't want to cross a line to be like over the line to be like take away from the dialogue.
It's kind of funny. What I've learned in working in comedies for the past, I don't know how long it's been, 10 years or so, is, how would you put it? I've got to watch the amount of funny that I think I need to put into something.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've done the same way in Parks. Like, I am not in charge of what is funny on a show. That comes from our showrunners, who oftentimes feel they're the creators of funny, right?
Right.
So I need to make sure that the type of funny that we put in is in service to what it is they're creating and what it is that they're writing for each show. Which is, I think, like you just said, it's kind of a fine line to walk. I could put in all sorts of things I think are funny, but it's in keeping with the tone of what the rest of that show is supposed to be.
One detail I wanted to ask you about in Adam's room is the wallpaper. Did you make that wallpaper? Is that real?
In Adam's wallpaper, so I had wallpaper in Adam's bedroom that is a Star Wars wallpaper.
Right.
It was only seen in season 1 because it was if you remember, it's like a kind of an off-white paper with a bunch of little scenes of, I think it was Return of the Jedi that's on there. I have to go back and look. So I bought a remnant of it it was like a foot long. And had to scan it and piece it all together and paint in the missing pieces and then have it printed like over at Aztec for us because I couldn't find it in quantity. So I found a little piece of it, able to paint it in, multiply it, do his whole room, and then the network said, every time we're in Adam's room, there's a bunch of little faces kind of staring back at us because all the characters are on there, kind of staring at you. And I was like, well, yeah, but it's cool,
Yeah, it's...
you know how network stuff is.
Yeah, notes.
So one of the heartbreaking things I had to do, because that was probably one of the favorite things that I was really proud of. Like we found this paper, I was able to, recreate it. And we got clearance on everybody that's on it. Got clearance from Lucas to use it, and then we had to get rid of it after that season. I think it maybe even been halfway through that first season.
That is so
the
funny.
network was really kind of.
It's so funny that you
kind
actually
of
have
hammering us on something.
that you have a story about that, because I looked on your website at your set photos, and I saw that, and I thought, oh yeah, that wallpaper, I remember that, like, that's cool. And then it's sometimes as a viewer, you just accept, like, oh yeah, that's what it looks like, and you don't remember because it was, you know what I mean, like that's their living room, and you sort of piece it, you don't remember every single thing, but to me, I'm like, that's Adam's, yeah, that's what it is. And the fact that it's not there anymore, I was like, oh, because when I just saw it on the picture of on your website, I was like, man, that's cool. I wonder if that's real or if you made that. That's awesome.
Yeah, one of the cool things that wallpaper did to that space, and what it does to all the spaces in the Goldbergs, is it adds this like visual texture to almost every set.
Yeah.
Like we never have a blank section of almost any interior we do, and also because I think that's kind of emblematic of what this era was. There's kind of this excess of design.
You have so much wallpaper. I mean, the whole house is just so much pattern and wallpaper. It's great.
I don't think I've ever had to coordinate so many different patterns together to try to work together, but also feel slightly off. Like I said, there was so much of this during this era that it felt right to do it this way. But it makes a very kind of cohesive visual texture behind all our actors.
Oh yeah,
so it's kind of this unified scatter of
you still
kind
have
of
palette
texture behind everybody.
You still have that.
Yeah, and so taking that out of Adam's room was like really heartbreaking, because that was now the only room without wallpaper, and I think it was really one of the spaces that it worked so well in, honestly, because it showed it was a wallpaper that was like uniquely.
Yeah, and do you know how hard it is? I mean, we know how hard it is to get clearance. I mean, you get clearance on so much on that show, and
yeah, it's funny, if you look at the beginnings of the show,
it's insane that you get that for network.
I know we started out with very little clearance. Like I said, we got a couple Star Wars clearance, we got some G.I. Joes and Hasbro stuff cleared right off the bat. But because we were a new show, we didn't really have any clout in, kind of the pop culture world yet as far as this stuff goes. As we go on season after season after season, it became more and more popular show, and more IPs and product wanted to start becoming a part of the show. So we were able to slowly replace, kind of fake cheated things with real things. And so we're kind of at the point now to where clearance hasn't become much of an issue anymore. It used to be to where we would almost not be able to shoot things because we didn't hear back on clearance. But now we're able to get so much cleared so much more quickly to use on the show.
It helps. I mean, it just helps the environment and the viewer to be all encapsulated into the show. But
oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, I looked up Evan Goldberg, who is the writer creator. I didn't realize how many documentaries this guy's into of like nostalgic, like our generation, which we are Zennials. I don't know if you know that, but we're like that mix of, we're like the best of both worlds of like a millennial and Generation Z. There's like a 3-year pocket in the late 80s and 1980 where we have the best of both worlds. Like we know a phone and a cell phone, and we had great kid TV, and we have streaming. Like we have like the best of everything kind of deal.
I need to tell my kids, because my kids still call me a boomer.
Boomer? You're not a boomer. All right,
I know.
That's not fair. So Evan Goldberg, did you meet him on Fanboys?
Yeah, so we met on Fanboys. I didn't meet him until after Fanboys. So,
but he wrote Fanboys, didn't he? He wrote Fanboys.
Yeah, so he and Ernie Klein. Yeah, so he'd written it. Ernie Klein. I think Ernie Klein had written the original draft. I think Adam kind of came into the production draft of it, or even vice versa. I'm not sure which way it ended up there, but the two of them were like integral to it. And so I had become good friends with Kyle Newman, who directed Fanboys, and I think I didn't meet Adam until after we had shot Fanboys. So I met him in Los Angeles back at home afterwards, and he was a great guy who obviously has this great vision, and I was able to work with him on Breaking In, which was for Fox, that was for Sony, and then that led to the Goldbergs, and then schooled with him. Yeah.
I have a whole page of just memories and things to talk about on Fanboys. But before that, because seriously, we could write a screenplay about the making of that film, and it would probably be funnier than that film.
Yeah, that was
insane.
Yeah, that was really unique. Yeah.
But before we get to that, I jumped in. I should ask how you started, like how you got into this and studying for it and all that.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me to hear how people became production designers or people started working in the art departments, the greater art department, if you will, because it's such like a niche thing, right?
Yeah.
Like who even knows that there is such a thing as an art department or there is somebody that has to design all this? Like, usually when I introduce myself to people that I meet, I don't say I'm a production designer or I'm an art director. I say I design movie sets. And then they kind of look and say like, oh,
so you dumb it down for everyone. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. So it's always interesting to hear like how people get into this career that probably so few people know even exists as a career. But I started, I grew up in Los Angeles, and when I was a young child, my parents actually got me into acting. Mm-hmm. So during the early 80s, I was on TV and commercials for like Tomy Toys and for Northern Soft Prince toilet paper, and I was in...
You still get any of those checks?
I was going to say I was in Richard Donner's Inside Moves feature film with Sean Savage.
That's
and
awesome.
Yeah, actually like a week ago. So every like 10 years I get a SAG check for like $20 because Inside Moves, plays on HBO or something.
So great. That's so great.
So yeah, so it's really funny that like that little part. I have like a little boy and I untie his shoes in the hallway. I'm like bugging a guy in the scene, So I got this big bowl cut in my head, and so yeah, that still is slide me $20 every 10 years.
There you go.
But that exposed me to the fact that this is a thing people create at a very young age. I don't think that most people kind of realize, especially kids, I don't think they really realize that there's industry that creates the things that they enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at a pretty young age, I was able to be exposed to this, as a career. I didn't want to continue in acting, at a pretty young age. I think by the time I was 10 or so, I was like, well, that's not really for me. But I always knew that being involved in that industry is what I wanted to do, although I couldn't really pinpoint what it is I wanted to do in it. And also growing up next to, in Los Angeles, there were so many, friends that had parents in the industry and things like that, you're kind of exposed to it at a pretty young age. So it wasn't probably till high school that this is going to be kind of weird, Discovery Channel used to be cool.
Oh, yeah.
They used to have a show about the making of Hollywood films. And it was called something like, I'd have to look it up, like Movie Magic or something. And it was like behind the scenes of special effects and production design and matte paintings and pyrotechnics and stunts. And watching that show kind of in my formative years, I said, like, that's kind of the world I want to be in. I'm not sure what it is, but that's, this kind of really cool show that kind of exposed me to a lot of that behind the scenes kind of work. So then I went to film school to study filmmaking and realized that area that I liked was called production design. And I studied that, which, in my opinion, there's not really great training out there even still for production designers or those who want to go into design like that. So a lot of it had to be taking classes that I think could help me, even though it wasn't necessarily part of the film curriculum.
I feel like if you were to design a class for production design, you'd have to be a real like jerk. And you'd be like, all right, cool. This shoots Friday. I want a budget tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, you'd have to be a real jerk about it because that's the reality of it.
Yeah, and I should tell you the joke. So I got into jerk mode when I went to grad school. I still didn't really feel like I had good training. I studied in grad school. I was in the MFA program at UC Irvine for theatrical scenic design.
Nice.
And you would spend, and these teachers, like, I loved them. Douglas Scott Goheen, who was an amazing theatrical designer, but he was purposefully horrible to you and your work so that you would get why what you did was wrong.
Oh,
so you would spend 2 weeks doing a drawing, which now I got to do a drawing like in an hour. But we'd spend 2 weeks doing a drawing. In my mind, it was beautiful. It was awesome. I'd bring it into class. He'd put it up on the board. And then he'd just start drawing right on top of it. Like, this is why this is wrong, this is why this is wrong, this is why this is wrong. Why is this person so big? Why is this person so small? Why is the light coming from two directions? And just like you'd sit there like your heart broken while you looked at this thing in your mind you worked on for weeks, and him just scribble over it and pinpoint every little bit that was wrong with what you were doing, which was incredibly effective because the fear of that shame really motivated you to...
fear of shame.
Fear of shame. Yeah, that's how
today.
we teach people, the fear of shame.
That's what I work for now. The fear of shame. Like, that is it. The going home at night after or watching your work on TV and just like getting the whip out and giving yourself some slashes of like, why did I pick that pillow?
Yeah, man, that defines our whole lives right there, the fear of shame.
Well, I mean, I like that guy then. I don't know. It's like,
yeah, like
that's reality.
To me, it was effective, yeah, and it sets us up for the pressures we deal with on a fairly regular basis here.
Yeah.
But getting back to the industry, I studied film design as well as I could in college. After college, in film school, you meet a lot of good friends, a lot of good people that you kind of collaborated with over the years in school. And a couple of them were making what turned into be Napoleon Dynamite, which ended up being a very popular film. But that was made just with a bunch of college friends right after we had finished school together. So we had made that film for a very small amount. It just took a couple months to do. And then once that was finished, we kind of said, well, like, okay, we need to kind of move on with our lives. What are we going to do now? Well, that, gets figured out.
Well, that was it,
I
man.
went to grad school.
That was it.
Yeah,
you weren't like a PA. You weren't like some struggling art director or set designer. You did like two things and then boom, you were Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah, so there was a really cool side to that, and then like a really hard side to that. Yeah, so I made Napoleon Dynamite like I was.
Well, yeah, because then everything else.
23, maybe 24.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like I went to grad school, and then like a year later, that was like edited. It was into Sundance. It was sold to Fox, and it was like, bam, a huge thing all of a sudden. And then I got an agent, and I started getting interviews on big projects with big directors and big actors, and I started designing like little films in Hollywood. And I had no idea what I was doing. I felt I kind of knew how to design a bit. I didn't know what an art department coordinator was. I didn't know what a set decorator was. I came into a couple of these projects like literally not knowing how to do the job.
Well, you surely didn't know what you were doing when you hired me.
Yeah, I know. Like you see, that's where things started to.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that because there's so much of this business of like fake it till you make it. I mean, there's so many times someone will say to me, like even just, oh, like when they come in this room and they go over and play with the blah 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 blah, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know. It's cool. And then like I turn around and look up on my phone like, what the fuck was that? What page was that? What are they talking about? I don't know what that is. Shit. Somebody help me. I do it now. So you gotta fake it.
Yeah, I had like one good friend in Los Angeles who's now a production designer, Nathan Ogilvy. And I had lots of friends in Los Angeles. I had one good friend who was like worked in the art department, and now he's a production designer. But at the time, he was like my go-to for a lot of information I needed. Yeah. And he was an art director at the time. And my plan, I took the Fanboys film, knowing like I'll bring Nathan with me as an art director, and he knows what's going on. And I think kind of between he and I, we could kind of make something happen, right? So I get to Albuquerque, and they're like, nope, you're not bringing anybody at all. You've got to use what's here. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And that's where I talked him into that. Like, we certainly don't have an art director budgeted as a position. We have a set decorator. And this, but the film was a union at this point, and I think that's why things were a little wompy. Right. So that's when I was able to, through several recommendations, find you. And I said, I can't believe you drove out to Albuquerque with some dude calling you.
I was trying to think who recommended me. I'm thankful because I met you and had that experience, but I don't know who. I can't remember who that was. And I have said this many times. I only talked to you over the phone twice, and then I hopped in my car and I drove to Albuquerque. Yeah. And halfway there, I was like, "Hey, can I talk to someone else?" there anyone else
Yeah,
there?
you were like, I don't trust this. Yeah, I'm glad that your parents instilled enough in you to get halfway there before you verified what was going on.
Yeah. I got halfway there and I'm like, this guy could be a serial killer, just like trying to kill me, and I should probably verify that this is a real thing. And the coordinator you hired got on the phone and started talking to me and said how nice you were and everything, and then I was like, she's in on it. Great, he's got her brainwashed, or like they're together and they're gonna kill me when I get there. But no. But
yeah, the best part about that was our coordinator Heidi is I didn't know what an art department coordinator was, which is like I think like the staple kind of one of the anchors of the art department is this position. And I go out to Albuquerque, and they're like, okay, we have a couple art department coordinators in town. You know, you can hire one of them. And I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
You know, I go out and I call my buddy Nathan. I'm like, what's a coordinator do? So I didn't know what these positions were, let alone how to utilize them or what the importance of them were. So, yeah, Fanboys is one of those ones where I like really got thrown into it. I've done a couple of smaller films in town that were significantly smaller than that in LA, where I kind of fumbled my way through them. But that was probably the big one where like I really kind of had to, like we were building sets, we had a sound stage, we were doing stunts, we were doing
that wasn't really a sound stage.
It was a warehouse where they kicked a bunch of hobos out of and we were able to shoot in it. But it was, I mean, as far as Albuquerque goes at that time, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I hope I never have to go back to that city. I don't think I need to go back to that city, let's just say. I feel like I've seen it.
Yeah.
We don't need to repeat that.
I agree with you. I think I think I'm good for life on that one.
Yeah. I liked that. I think one of the first things someone told me when I got there was, "Oh, they shoot the show Cops here." I was like, "Oh,
yeah, you know,
that's cool."
Like I grew up in LA, which is a pretty big city, right? I had never seen a SWAT team in LA in my entire life. We saw the SWAT team every other day in Albuquerque, like blowing past us on the freeway or
helicopters.
Yeah, it was a pretty active place as far as that goes.
One night, you and I were in the office, and a homeless person broke in. Remember that?
Yeah, that's right. I did totally forget about that. We had to talk him out of there, right?
Yeah, you were super cool. I grabbed my X-Acto knife. I was ready to take an eyeball out.
I think we were building that model that night. That we were building. We were building models at the time, like the trash compactor or something for that. Yeah, and some guy, because we were there late, and we were like downtown Albuquerque. And the door was just left open, and he walked right in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was weird.
You were like, "Hey, man, want me to go talk outside?" And then I was like, "I'm blocking the door behind you."
Yeah.
And you quickly got him out, and then you were like, "Let me in." That was scary. There were so many scary things in that huge swap meet that was like all socks and guns you could buy or something. It was like super weird. It was just, there was like one good restaurant. They did have good neon. I remember having
because there was the Route 66 went through there, so we were able to enjoy a bit of what the place used to be. I think as far as its aesthetics go, it's pretty amazing. It's weird. The rest of that state is gorgeous. Santa Fe is gorgeous. Not to talk down to Albuquerque, but it's the low point in that state.
Yeah.
It was
and that maybe the time we were there, it was going through something, but
yeah, but on the flip side, remember all the great people that the 501st, Blade Seller, all those guys.
Oh yeah, people that really helped us.
There's also this huge community of people that were just amazing people that made that shoot possible for us, because we didn't have a ton of money to do it. We didn't have a ton of time to do it, but
no,
because of what it was, we were able to kind of tap into this huge community there that was the real kind of gem of what that place is.
Well, it was a lot of the Star Wars community that helped us out and gave us costumes and props and set dressing and toys to use, and I mean they helped us out.
Their houses and
they would have parties.
Yeah.
And we were
like, we heard you know somebody who has a thermal detonator.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, well Jesse's going. Let me give him a call. And there's this huge chain of talking to guys trying to track down dressing and props and everything there. It was real guerrilla-y at first. And it was actually the film that turned union, and that's how I got in at that point. I don't know if you were in by then or not, but
I was. I had gotten in on a super small film before that, but yeah, this was
fancy.
Yeah, ooh, yeah. But yes, you also introduced the whole crew to airsoft guns. I must say. And us as a crew, it was like by the time the film had completed, everyone had an airsoft gun, and we had a huge battle on like the fifth floor.
During that night at the hotel.
Yes.
And there's like because the hotel was probably half our crew, 150 people staying at a hotel that were all on the crew. Yeah, we had like this huge airsoft battle.
Yeah, down the hallway. We had like teams.
Yeah, it was pretty stupid. Wow.
I mean, what assholes we were. Like, there were airsoft pellets. There were thousands of airsoft pellets all over the ground in everybody's room.
When they were vacuuming it up the next day, remember, like, the sound of, like, a pellet, like, hitting the inside of a vacuum? It was just, like, that constant, like, vacuum sound of little pellets going in the vacuum.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was...
Yeah, that was great. That was a high point. That was fun. I mean, I worked with a crew who was like the color green. I mean, taking their price tags off of their tools, and I mean, we got it done, but it wasn't ideal. It wasn't what I was even used to. Only because I had come from Bones, so I had an idea of what a crew actually was, and I remember you and I doing so much work, and I said to you, I'm really embarrassed because you're the production designer and you shouldn't be doing this, and you were like, what do you mean? No, like, we were in the van.
Well, I remember.
We were in the making that van.
Yeah, we were cutting out, like, I was using a Dremel to cut out the holes in the dashboard to add all the switches and buttons and lights and all the little gack that's on there.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that like, you and I had, like, a passion for what this project was supposed to be, and that passion drove us to making it as good as we can make it, and to working 20 hours a day and to staying late at night.
Yeah.
Doing all these things ourselves, whereas most of the other members we had on our crew, construction to set dressers to swinging, kind of across the board, were just 9-to-5ers that were local. So they were like, "Well, we're done for the day. See ya." Tools down, gone.
I know
we're
that.
Like, man, but this.
I know at that one point you and I had stayed up like 30 hours or something, and we had taken like naps in the set because it was like that last day on stage. And that was the day, like, Kevin Spacey came to set, and I was like, I don't even remember meeting him. That was, like, supposed to be the highlight of the whole film, because he was a producer.
I think we were, like, walking, I think the sun came up, it was call, they were coming to shoot. It must have been the archives room, right? I think that was the last room that we did, because we pushed that to the end, because it was such a complicated build, as well as such a complicated dress, that by the time we left, like, the sun was coming up. Like, that's when we met Kevin Spacey there in the parking lot, which was, we were like, yep, good to see you, buddy. Adios.
Yep. Hi, how are you? Yep, I don't know what my name is, so I gotta go to bed. Like, I was just so tired. And I would say probably one of my bigger set fails as a set decorator was that one bedroom of, I think it was, what's his name, Linus? It was like the main character's bedroom, and it was like a super, quick shot, and I didn't have any dressing left. Like, I had used everything, and all I had left were all those action figures inside.
We put those all up.
Yeah, but I remember you walking in, and you were like, "What? Like, maybe I could get some posters." And I was like, "I'm really sorry, I don't have any dressing left," because I brought a truckload of dressing with me from LA for all of these sets, because there wasn't any prop houses there.
Yeah, and I think that if you looked at, like, the lamps and the side table and the bed and things like that, they were the same as what we used in, like, Hutch's room or something.
Yeah.
I think that was, like, the big, had to reuse a lot of that kind of set dressing. But fortunately, on something like that, like, what you succeeded in was that stuff didn't matter. That was background filler that held up kind of the unique stuff that you did have, like the idea to put all those toys up on the wall, and it created, like, this really nice pattern, and it was visually interesting, and showed that there was a big difference between the way he displayed something versus the way Hutch displayed something in his place, which was much more chaotic. And
Hutch's garage was awesome. That was a fun set. There was just everything Star Wars I think we could find, we threw in there. It was great.
Yeah, and his was cool. His was used and played with, and all of his stuff was used by someone who appreciated it for the use he got out of it, whereas Linus's was more, particular and on display, and, and not necessarily as broken into as Hutch's was. It was like a really nice contrast in who each of those guys were. Using the same type of dressing, but displaying it in a much different way.
Yeah. Well, it's a trick. I also remember, like, department heads or whatever, there was few people that we would get together and go to dinner, and I remember going to dinner the one night, and this actor had just come on, and he had the worst laugh, and he was like, I was like, who the frig is this guy? And you're like, I don't know, it's this guy named Seth Rogen. I don't know, they're all hot about him. And I was like, yeah, well, that laugh's got to go. I was like, this guy's a douche.
So this was probably like right before Seth Rogen became Seth Rogen, right?
Yeah.
And his laugh, I'm sure, was consistent through his whole life. But at the time, it wasn't like the Seth Rogen laugh. It was just a weird laugh.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I've been at Sony for the past 7 years. His office has been downstairs from mine.
Oh, yeah.
So guess what I hear echoing up through the hallway every couple hours? It's like that same Seth Rogen laugh echoing up through us.
You should really tell him One-Up said you'll never make it.
Tell me he had his doubters, 12 years ago.
Yeah, I guess I was one of them. Cut to, like, I would kill to work for him, so that's great. I think I have a list of, like, 20 other things from that movie that we probably shouldn't talk about, because it's either just talking shit.
We don't want to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because we could. It was a weird group. It was a new group, like new director, new designer, even our DP was fairly new at the time too. So part of it stems from us all being pretty new to what we were doing, and also part of it stems from it was a little movie in Albuquerque. So what class of crew are we going to get out there, right? It's
and no one was
fringier and a little bit.
No one was watching us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we were like just a bunch of idiots let loose in the desert.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, we shoveled snow with our hands. I mean, that was...
Yeah, we were trying to clear this.
Because...
we stayed because it was, like a freak snowstorm the night before on a abandoned road that wasn't supposed to be snowy.
Yeah, and so you and I are out there, like, kicking and, like, using our hands to get rid of snow, and you and I are just looking at it like, this is ridiculous, what are we doing? Like, we had to go, I think we went and bought a shovel or something and tried to, like, shovel it away, and, it was just an insane amount of work that we actually accomplished, mostly you and I, let's be honest.
But I'm glad I came into it with, like, the not knowing the way that I did. I remember, like, you told me that you had a driver drive your set dressing truck for you, and I didn't understand that at the time because everything I had done had been, like, so small. Like, I would drive the truck full of my stuff.
Yeah, no.
And you were like, no, I've got a driver. He drives my truck for me. He drops it off where I need it. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, that's like a position. In the real world, that's a position. You guys drive things for you. You guys do this for you.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of like, what kind of magical world are you talking about where this happens? That sounds awesome. So to me, like, even knowing people that had been more successful than me and kind of getting the inside scoop on some of the stuff was like motivation to know, like, okay, this gets easier and better and bigger in the long run here. So it was always kind of cool catching little glimpses like that of what the real Hollywood was, besides what we were trying to do at the time. What my perception of it was.
We did, I think, 2 days or 3 days shooting in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and we stayed in that hotel of No Country for Old Men. That was creepy as shit.
Yeah.
That was creepy.
Yeah, it was like an old Victorian.
Yeah. Super creepy.
Yeah, all creaky floors and stuff, and we came out of it, and it's like right down into the little town square we were shooting in. Yeah. So,
Yeah, it was, I mean, I have many, there's highlights there of, like, Carrie Fisher being batshit crazy, eating gummy bears off of the floor and talking to herself.
Yeah, like, kind of rocking back and forth. Yeah, it was interesting, because we met so many cool people, right?
Yeah, Billy D.
We met Captain Kirk,
Shatner.
And it was like this really cool, kind of amazing to be like that young and that new to this and be able to have access to kind of things that are perceived as being so amazing and great and beyond what you
legends. And I think too, I know you and I are like huge Star Wars fans. It was like, I cannot believe Princess Leia is like sitting over there, or I can't believe, like, Billy D's there. Like, this is crazy. Lando, hello. Like,
Yeah, I went out. I don't know if you were there. I went out to dinner with like Billy D, and he talked about how he's a painter now, and that you could see his paintings in hotel lobbies, and he sells them to the landscapes at hotels and stuff. So it's really kind of cool to get these like moments with some of these people that you've like never in your adolescence or growing up or even the beginning of your career would you ever think that you would be doing something like that.
It was the best and the worst kind of experience. And the weird thing was, too, we did that in, like, 2004 or 2005, I think. We shot for, like, a month. We had maybe a month prep and a month shoot, maybe. And then it didn't come out for 5 years. And in that time, they did reshoots, which I wasn't a part of one of them. I was a part of the second batch of reshoots.
Yeah, so I wasn't a part of the first one either, and then you and I both did that second batch where we did the big prints in the conference room in Pasadena.
Yeah.
But yeah, this film was like really, and I'll speak, as I said, like not knowing any of the backstory to the upper echelons of filmmaking, but I mean, this film was really destroyed by that process. For whatever reason, that process happened. I don't think the film was destroyed. That's a bad way to put it. It's still a pretty fun and really great film to watch, but a lot of that heart, I think, was initially what we shot as in the original script was watered down quite a bit for whatever reason.
And
it took years.
It took years
in figuring out what they were going to do with it.
I don't know, and they sort of missed the opportunity to release it the year of like the Star Wars anniversary. And just things went by, like, it was dumb that they didn't release it. And then they finally did, which was so, like, okay, now it's coming out. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, that was so long ago.
It just kind of appeared one day.
It was super weird. It was super weird. But I am super thankful that I met you. And one of the weird things in this world is that we haven't worked together since, right? Did we? Oh, we did one commercial together. You hired me for like a commercial.
Yeah, we did a commercial too. But I've tried. You've always,
I turn you down.
Turned it down.
No, it's a weird thing. It's like timing doesn't work out, and then you're like, I'm free and you're not, or you hired someone, or I'm available, or I'm not available. It sucks because there are plenty of people in this business you want to work with, and the timing and the project just don't line up. It sucks.
Yeah, everything is it's such a weird, fluid industry, such a weird way of working, too, compared to kind of conventional jobs that, due to the fluid nature of it, you think you're going to stick with people forever, people that you, like, thoroughly enjoy, that you appreciate their work, and that you enjoy their personalities and who they are. And, one little thing could throw all that out of sync, and what's good for one person might not be good for, the other person as far as timing goes and scheduling and, so it's hard to kind of keep in sync as much as you want to with the people that you enjoy the most in the industry.
And even in that, I've not even seen you. I haven't seen you in years, which is odd too. And but we text all the time and we always keep in touch. But it's a weird thing like that of even being on the same lot. Sometimes your shows just don't line up. It's weird. It's so weird.
Yeah, like I've got like other friends that work on other shows on my lot, and they're like, "Hey, today's the day you can come look at, I wanted, let's say, what's shooting on Sunny right now? That Apple one about space. I forgot what it's called.
Oh, All Mankind.
For All Mankind. Yeah, so I wanted to do a lot of sets like so badly, and I knew a bunch of the swing gang, and they, finally set up a time where I could come look, and I was out scouting that day, and it's, something as simple as that. Yeah, walking the next stage over. It's hard.
It's crazy. I wanted to ask you about, there was a pilot you did called Brave New World, which I did get to see your sets for some weird, for some reason, I was shooting at the Disney,
the Golden Oak Ranch. Yeah, you were there shooting, right? Yeah.
I was shooting Parks, I think, and you were shooting this pilot, which I thought was the best, plot. It was basically Williamstown, Virginia, colonial Williamsburg,
so it was
behind the scenes.
It was a a pilgrim reenactment village. And it was kind of like the opposite. So it was about the people that worked at a pilgrim reenactment village, which was really cool. So it was Peter Tolan created it, who created Rescue Me, like a really great pedigree as far as who was creating the show. It was for Sony, produced it for NBC, and we built a set that was probably $1 million set.
You built so much. You built a whole little You built that whole like colonial Williamsburg type. It was awesome.
Yeah, we built all that.
Yeah.
It was really, really intense and really big and really expensive and really kind of grand. Ed Begley was in it, and and then it was the scope of it was huge. We took up that huge portion of the Disney range there to build that, and it was like another one of those things where you put so much into it because you think it's such a great product and such a great idea. And NBC passed on it, which was, pretty heartbreaking at the time.
Don't you think that that's so heartbreaking? Like when you do a pilot and then it doesn't get picked up, it's gone. Like I know that we're only part of the design team and the writer who probably worked like 5 years or whatever on it, and it's gone. Like you make a pilot, they don't like it, done. And it's so much money. It's so much time and effort and stress. I hate doing pilots.
I mean, that's still the biggest single set I've ever built. That's still the most amount of money I've ever spent on a singular, week for the shooting, and just gone. Like the amount of resources, the amount of research, the amount of time that we put into it. It was. We had live animals all over the set. We had working furnaces. We had working, colonial ovens that were in blacksmith shops and Indian villages and. And then on top of that, we had like the gift shop and the parking for the guests to visit and all the signage and, it was the employee break rooms that were behind the
I feel like they should redo that. I feel like that's a good idea. I feel like people would watch that.
I think so. I also wish that failed pilots would have an opportunity to exist somewhere.
Yeah, someone said that to me years ago, like there should just be a network of like pilots. I think actually, I don't know. I think it's actually Sarah Silverman said it on Howard Stern once, that she wanted to create a network of pilots that she had done that didn't get picked up. And then it was like, but yeah.
You could fill a whole, you could fill a whole like streaming service with failed pilots. There's so much content. How many are produced every year, and such a small percentage make it into anything. But some of them are amazing. Like I've seen pilots that I've watched where I was like, this is amazing. How could this not have been made?
So much time and effort and money. And I don't know. Maybe, in this new era that we're in the next year or so, I don't know if they're going to spend the time and money and the effort to make such like frivolous pilot. I don't know. I wonder if that'll cause less pilots.
Yeah, that pilot model has been changing a lot lately. It'll be interesting to see if this, affects how that's done.
Yeah.
Even more.
Before I ask you about your thoughts on pandemic, we glossed over Napoleon Dynamite a little bit. So I rewatched some of it the other day because it's hilarious and it's hard not to want to watch the whole thing, but these two little dreamboats over here keep me a little busy. But I wanted to ask about the locations of the houses. So, when you scattered these houses, were these people living like this? Like, what happened? Like, what was going on there?
So we shot it in the town where the director grew up, and so he wrote this script. This is in very, very, very rural Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote the script with certain of these locations in mind. And so none of the house exteriors are the same as the house interiors, kind of typically for what we do, kind of typical practice for what we do, So he had a lot of these places in mind. We still scouted them and looked at options to make sure that the aesthetics were right and that it kind of told the right story for us, not that there weren't better options for it. But a lot of, interior design is probably what you're talking about, especially Napoleon's house, which is pretty funky. Everything that I used on that show is stuff I purchased in that area, or stuff I borrowed in that area, or stuff I rented in that area. So the Napoleon house was pretty empty. That was an empty house, the interior. I had to build like a little wall in there, like one of the walls in the kitchen I built that's wood paneled, and there was a couple pieces of furniture that were left in that place, but I scoured like that tent, because kind of the idea for a lot of that aesthetic was it's kind of the land that time forgot, which is some of that Midwestern aesthetic.
Which you don't know what the time is there, because your soundtrack is like 80s. And then but then you got Jamiroquai in there, so like the time of that is unknown.
Yeah, I think the intent was that it was always like a contemporary film. It's just in a place where contemporary aesthetics and life didn't really matter. It didn't matter that things were new or that things were of the now. All that matters is that things function the way they need to function for us. So a lot of that aesthetic came from what is still kind of lying around in this world that people still use and still function well and still, tell the story of who the characters are. So, I think a lot of the Napoleon furniture I bought from a storage unit that was up there just outside that town in Idaho there. So I got a couple of those suites of furniture, matching lamps and things like that kind of came together. But a lot of like that aesthetic up there is 20, 30 years old at the time. So honestly, it was a lot easier to dress and design that film there than I think it would have been in LA. Yeah.
Because you would have gotten pieces that are statement pieces and not like regular, everyday sort of life pieces.
Exactly. And also, we get stuff from our rental houses here, and some stuff's a little beat up. It's not as taken care of as it should be because it moves 20 times a year, and you've got to fix it. But because I bought a lot of the stuff from people that were still, up until recently, using it, a lot of the stuff was still in pretty great condition. It was still stuff that people took care of and cleaned and maintained and had on display in their homes. So I think I feel kind of lucky in that we found this really great stuff for the show that was in pretty immaculately preserved condition because it was something that had, kind of been caringly used for the past 30, 40 years.
How did you come up with the locker colors?
We looked out. The school was actually those colors.
Oh, that's the wrong answer.
I know. I feel bad even saying that, but yeah, so that's school. And that became like this big iconic part of the whole marketing of the film. Like the poster had the lockers, and the trailer had the lockers in it. And that was the actual high school that the director of the film went to.
Oh my gosh, that's
so
crazy.
He was like very intimately, had exactly in mind what he wanted for the shots and how he wanted it to look. And wasn't that cool though? Like the color combination was perfect, and it was like just funky enough to work. So.
Now, I know the answer to this question, but how did you come up with the Vote Pedro t-shirt?
Vote for Pedro. Those are just the director's wife bought the peel and stick stickers like down at the craft store and just made the shirt, in the driveway.
It's so crazy. So crazy.
So yeah, a lot of that stuff was like, how would these people make what what they show and what they use. So like then the flyers they have are like done by on the computer. It's all kind of done by hand. So the Vote for Pedro flyers is all hand drawn, even the text.
But that's all your drawings, right? The unicorn and like all that.
All the text I had. So John Heater, who plays Napoleon, he drew the actual liger and stuff. So it would be like in his style. And then I put it together by drawing all the rest of the flyer and stuff around it.
That's awesome. And then you did I love the photos in their living room, like the.
Oh yeah, so day one I kind of, and trying to study for what that film should be. It's a weird aesthetic, but I bought a bunch of like old Sears catalogs and furniture catalogs from the 70s and department store fashion catalogs from the 70s and 80s to try to figure out what that look is. And like that photography style was obviously so popular that one of my first ideas was, because we had those scenes of sitting on the couch against the wall, which is like the death knell of cinematography there, right? So it was, how do we like enliven that little tableau? How do we make that feel like it's something that's interesting and is kind of serving what the feel should be? So it was that type of photography that was. Yeah, in fact, I've still got those. They're in my house here somewhere.
There's your college. There's your kid's college fund. There you go.
Yeah, so we made those on day one. It was like I took the photos of both him and Kip and Napoleon in the driveway, and then I went back to the little house I was staying in and photoshopped them all together and printed them out and bought those frames down at the little craft store in town.
Iconic. There you go.
Yeah.
That movie holds up. I'll tell you that much.
Oh, good. I haven't seen it in a while. I need to rewatch it and see if I'm embarrassed for what I've done or if I'm still proud of it.
Oh yeah, you should be. I mean, it's really good. It's really funny, and I think aesthetically it's fun to watch because it's so weird. It's like you nailed this weirdness, this vernacular weirdness of like people in Idaho. That's kind of fascinating. I mean.
Well, good. I'm glad. And also, I think one of the things similar to like how Fanboys is really fueled by like our passion for the projects, like Napoleon more so probably than almost any other project I've done, was fueled by like this communal passion to do it. We didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't have any money to do it. We, certainly didn't have any inkling of what the success of it would be.
God.
But we really had like this passion for what it could be. So, one of the things we really took the time to figure out is like, what is this language of design that's in this film? Mm-hmm. So everything from, the cinematography to how each of those frames was set up by our DP, which is, each one's like a little tableau. It's a little moment in time. It's kind of this locked off frame that because like that's the way it was shot, I was able to cater the design to each of those little locked off frames. We were able to kind of dress to what that image we felt was kind of the right thing to do for it. So it was kind of like a commercial, how you can art direct each kind of camera setup, very purposefully and very directly. It's kind of the same thing we did for this film, because each little locked off shot needs to almost kind of feel like a little piece of artwork in and of itself.
Oh yeah, they're great little vignettes in the film, and that alpaca. I mean, it's all the teeter ball. Like they're all really beautiful shots too. Because you just have that big wide open space when he's out with the alpaca, and just even like the van, I don't want to say van, but the place where the dude lives, like just the scenery is so beautiful, and then you have this weird piece of set dressing in there. It's just such a story in just the look of it.
Okay, one of the things that we had on that, like we didn't have any money, but because we were all in college together and the director had been coming up with the stories like for years, is that we had like a lot of time to think about this and figure it out, like while we were in school and while we were in quote pre-production for it. So we benefited from the amount of time we had, whereas we didn't have the money to do what I think normally would have been expected. We had the time to really kind of figure out and
yeah, time and money.
What that aesthetic should be.
Time and money. Right. You always want more. Speaking of time and money, I don't know how you have enough time, but you actually hold a completely other job while you do this in entertainment design, and you've been doing it for years, and you you design outside projects for like Disney or Universal or DreamWorks, or you've had so many projects over the years. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you do two at the same time?
Yeah, so I've got like two pretty distinct careers going on. One's obviously production design for film and television. I'm also an art director in what's called location-based entertainment or entertainment design. And I've been doing that actually longer than I've been designing, longer than I've been a production designer. Mm-hmm. So what that means is it boils down to I essentially designed theme parks and museums and places like that, kind of immersive environmental design. And I've been doing that since when I was in high school. I actually was trying to figure out how I could learn, practical art and design a bit better, and got a job as an assistant for a pretty big company that designed theme parks. They were subcontractors to Universal and Disneyland and places like that. And so I swept floors and I cleaned, the milling machines after school, and was eventually able to work my way up into working in the art department, where I eventually was trained to become a model maker for a long time there. And that's where I first kind of got my foot in the door into this kind of environmental, entertainment design. And so once I went to grad school, I started working for Walt Disney for Disneyland, where I designed parades, and I designed a lot of the kind of holiday overlays at Disneyland Park. And, from there on, I started working more and more with a lot of the different companies that have theme parks and started designing theme parks.
And
a lot of museum work also.
What is like the duration of a project?
Years and years, depending on what it is. It's an industry that works significantly slower than what we're used to in television, because what we're designing in this industry is real life and needs to exist out there in the real world.
Right.
So there's a lot more consideration and thought put into how something is built and what the narrative story is of what it is that we're designing. So it's kind of a nice break that I'm able to do that whenever I can. Because I feel like it's time for me to kind of catch my breath and still design while being on a significantly different, timetable than what we're used to in the film and television industry.
Well, yeah, and you have more than actors and crew being a part of it. I mean, it's, as you said, it's like real architecture and real spaces that people experience. And how are some of them permanent, or are they like just installations that are pop-ups? Like,
yeah, so it's a bit of both. I've got a lot of permanent stuff. Last year, I designed the DreamWorks Theater at Universal Studios Hollywood, which is a permanent building that's there. Last year, I designed the exterior of the Pets Place land that's going in Universal also. Mm-hmm. So that's opening up. Well, it's supposed to open up this year, but who knows now with what's going on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot of it is real permanent, big park infrastructure, type builds and spaces. And then a lot of what I do too, or at least when I was working for Disneyland, a lot of it was the real temporary parades and holidays and things like that. So if you go to New Orleans Square and there's a Nightmare Before Christmas, theming and decoration, all that, I designed a lot of that at the park. So and then also same thing for museums. I designed a lot of museum displays and exhibitry and things like that. I designed for like National Geographic and the Smithsonian and some really big places.
What is the Obama one? Well. What's the Obama town?
I did concept designs for the Obama Presidential Library.
Wow.
And I believe that the firm I was doing it for actually wasn't selected for the contract. But yeah, it's kind of cool working on things like that, to have the opportunity to design such a wide variety of spaces.
Damn.
And it's interesting that the design, the big, obviously the design skills between the two careers is pretty similar. You're designing themed spaces. But in film and television, we're really able to control that POV. I design exactly what we're going to see, and through, cinematography, those views are so controlled that you only see what it is that we want you to see as filmmakers. In entertainment design, you're really designing a completely immersive experience so that these narratives are able to be explored by the individual guests that come into each space.
And so lighting. I would think lighting probably is a big thing. You're not controlling.
Lighting's huge, yeah. Yeah, just like I'm the art director for a show, there's huge lighting designers and lighting technicians that really have to take into consideration how each of these things are being lit and viewed. And it's you want the narrative to be explored by guests, not necessarily have the narrative told to you. So because of that, you have to design these environments that are conducive to kind of that narrative storytelling that's being explored by the guests as they go through these spaces.
Yeah, they're beautiful. I'll definitely link your webpage to this. They're beautiful designs. I mean, and
cool, thanks. Just
awesome sort of like you have this like integration of your sets and then like these projects, and you're like, man, the scope of these other projects is sometimes a massive amount of work. I could see how it would take years. I mean,
yeah, I was the art director on the Harry Potter experience in the UK, which was I took that. We have design phases, and eventually I took that through schematic design. But that was multi-year project by the time that was built and opened in the UK. There's other projects I've done that have taken, I've stuck with them for years and years. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes these projects move between separate companies. So Universal Studios or Universal Creative is what they're called, will subcontract out projects to other design companies, and sometimes they change those design companies if they want to change the direction of something. And I've done like the same project for multiple different design companies, even years apart from each other.
Wow.
So yeah, it's interesting to see how things have kind of evolved and changed. There's so much. The interesting thing is there's so much like film property that is attractive to these location-based destinations. So I spent a couple of years working with Lionsgate developing locations for like Hunger Games parks and Mad Men, bars, environments, and things like that. So
when
cool to see the crossover between film and
but when you do things like you were saying, like Harry Potter and Hunger Games, do you ever talk to the designers of the film or the show? I mean, I wouldn't think you'd have to. You're going off of what's on screen. I don't think that you would have to, but
yeah, in my mind, I'm always thinking like, why would you not hire the guy that designed this originally?
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to ask, but I didn't.
Yeah, and the reality of the fact is that it is a fairly specialized skill set when designing something for a larger public to come into, as opposed to designing something strictly for like a film or television narrative. So we've taken into consideration capacities and back-of-house requirements, and there's so much kind of technical practicality that has to go into these spaces that almost somebody specialized in that world really needs to focus on how to make those work. Yeah. So I personally have never taught. It's kind of interesting. I always feel kind of weird about it. I feel like I'm kind of stealing somebody's stuff. But yeah, even the times when I was doing this stuff for Harry Potter, and then on to the Mad Men and Lions and Gates, Hunger Games stuff. It's like I just became like best friends with those projects. I watched all the films. I'd take all the screenshots. I'd do every kind of behind-the-scenes research I could do to figure out what these places are supposed to be.
I think it's an ode to. It's kind of like a celebration, sort of like your work was so good that they want to, make it into a real space. I would take it as a compliment.
I think so too. And so hopefully that these other designers that have had their work kind of emulated by people like me, hopefully can appreciate the care that we do put into it. Because everything I'm doing, I'm trying to do it with the same kind of heart and aesthetic and communicative language that they put into the films. And so part of it too is we have to extrapolate on what we see on screen, because what we see on screen isn't necessarily going to make the best real world environments for us. But the intent is always to kind of capture that same purpose and the same emotional feel that they had in their films. So on something like the Hunger Games, where I'm making several environments that didn't necessarily exist in the films, I'm trying to make things that could feel like they were part of those films. That could feel like they were part of what those designers would have had if they had them in their films. So yeah, I'm trying to be as respectful and considerate of those types of designs as I can be, because I know that there's a very strong purpose to why those designs were done the way they were.
Don't you think it's a sin that production designers don't get royalty checks, or like it's so crazy sometimes that
the amount of what we put on a screen is huge, obviously, right? And it's considered to be an art, and it's like an art that's replicated and seen millions of times over. So I always feel like, I've heard from my art director that at one point the Art Directors Guild was asked to merge with the DGA at a certain point so that they could receive all those types of accommodations that directors get. For whatever reason, they decided to remain independent. But at the very least, I feel like we're probably one of the most underrated aspects of filmmaking.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not just saying that because we're in it. I'm saying it's true. Our work is on screen at all times, basically. And I mean, I know it's up to the writers and the actors and the director. I know that, but it's
and our work will be on screen when there isn't any actors or dialogue on either.
Yeah.
There's also times where we're just simply looking at environments in films and television. And I think it's a bit more disappointing than I thought it would be, the amount of appreciation that I think design gets in this type of work.
Oh, absolutely. And even, winning an Emmy was phenomenal. Personally, it didn't do anything. I still gotta wake up. You know what I mean? Like, you still gotta wake up. You still gotta haul your shit. You still gotta, It's still exhausting. I went back to the same show and I didn't even get any more money and I won an Emmy for that show. It made no difference to me, but I'm sure as shit if I was an actor and went back to the show, if I, it would have been different. So yeah, or a director or a writer, I'm sure if they're not under a contract and you negotiate, see, that's what we're missing kind of. We don't have that. Decorators especially, at least you have the ADG. I mean, I
feel like we've allowed for ourselves to be taken with less seriousness or less importance than some of the other
I wonder
fields
why.
have been.
I mean, there's always times, like, how many times have you started a project before you were on payroll?
How many times have I started projects before there's even a director, before there's...
Or you've scouted.
anything, you know?
Yeah. And it happens, especially scouting with designers, and, like, you're scouting on a Saturday because it's the only time you can get in and you're not paid. Or it's constantly like, hey, do me a favor and, you know, we'll just do this thing. And I don't know. It's underappreciated. I don't know why we allow ourselves to be treated like that.
Yeah, I know. It's a collective mindset. And also we're constantly... the thought that it is a privilege to do what we do is kind of constantly reinforced to us, which is, I think, not the best mentality for us to have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's this constant kind of like, well, I mean, look what you're able to do. Aren't you lucky?
Right.
That's kind of, I think, pressed to us from above quite frequently, that we're, you know, lucky to be in the positions we're in. We're in the rallies. Is that a show like the Goldbergs or a show like Parks and Rec could not exist without the kind of creative minds that are visually building those environments at all. Exactly. But on the flip side, it couldn't exist without grips. It couldn't exist without our boom operators. It couldn't exist without any of the positions that are in there. So it's interesting that the disparity between appreciation, I suppose, even though appreciation, who cares? It's nice, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I
don't know what to think about that, other than I do agree with you that it does seem like a bit of a travesty that the amount of effort and time and craft that goes into this is, I think, very much underappreciated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a show like the Goldbergs, not to toot our horn, but like
toot away.
Every single thing we do is handcrafted. Every single product you see on the screen is a real product we created. Every food product, every Atari game that's brand new and packaged that the kid opens up. Every, you know, vintage can of Coke is something we've made. So there's so much effort that goes into this type of craft that it would be nice that it was appreciated. Also, maybe it doesn't matter that it's appreciated. Maybe it fulfills the needs of the story, and the story as a whole is what's appreciated. And as long as we're supporting that, maybe it's, you know, maybe we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So
well, you have
I kind of go back and forth on it, but
you have to have inner.
I think about, or that
it's your inner love of it that makes you get up every day. Otherwise, why would you do it? I mean, I always say to myself, well, I'm not pushing concrete. You know, my job is hard, but I'm not out there. You know, I'm not physically being beat down every day. I mean, you kind of are. I mean, you hate to say it, but you are.
Sometimes I'm scouting in the van, and I look out and I see a guy pushing concrete, and I'm like, that doesn't look so bad. Maybe I'll do that for a while.
Yeah, you'd last like one day. You'd be like, man.
It's hot.
Then you'd be like, hey, look at that van going by. That looks pretty cool. That guy's sitting in a van. Although I don't know how much longer we're going to be sitting in vans. I don't know about scouting with this pandemic. I don't know how we're going to pull that off. I think it's going to have to be pictures only.
Good. I'm fine with that. I don't want to go to another van in my life.
Yeah, I know. Every production designer is super happy about pandemic and scouting.
I was always a big self-drive, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, self-drive, yeah. What do you think? I mean, I don't think whatever standards we set are going to be forever, but do you have any idea when you're going to go back, or if you're, you know?
I am a person that knows nothing. My wife is a nurse.
Yeah.
So she's much more versed in this than me, so I'm fortunately able to, you know, glean a bit of her insight into this, but with nothing getting better, I don't see how we're going to be able to progress unless we make kind of changes to how we do things. I also feel that studios and creators of content are going to need to create new content. We're running out of it, and it's going to kind of, dwindle at a pretty quick rate here.
Yeah.
So I don't see how there's not going to be a desire for the studios to open up as soon as they can after they figure it out how to do that.
Yeah. I think everyone's...
So I'm sure that that's going to equate to us having to work in a much different way than what we're used to working in.
Yeah. I think... I don't know. I just think we're all going to get it. I think it's inevitable. I think we're all going to get it. I think, and you just hope that it's not serious when you do get it. I don't know. I don't know how else. I'm not just saying like the entertainment industry, but everyone who goes back to an office or this and that. And it's like, and some of us will get it and it won't mean a thing. And some of us will get it and it'll be bad and that sucks. And I just, I'm afraid to go out of the house at this point. I don't know. I just think we're all going to get it. It's inevitable.
Yeah, it seems like if there is no solution to it, then there's no other choice but for us to, for it to work its way through us one way or the other. So,
I mean, especially, hey man,
weird.
I'm lucky the kids are young. I don't have to do the homeschooling and all that, and I especially think once kids go back to school, unfortunately, then it's going to go, everyone's going to get it. I know some guy on my crew has kids in school, and then his kids get sick, and then he's sick, and then like my lead man gets sick, and then I get sick. It happens all the time in our crew. And
as soon as your kids are old enough to,
as
soon as your kids are old enough to be in school, your whole life is one never-ending cold.
Yeah. So I can imagine, once schools open, it's just, and I'm not saying that's a bad, it's a bad thing. I mean, schools have to open. I'm not saying don't open them, but yeah, I think that's a huge deterrent too, not just us going back to work. I think kids going back to school is a huge thing for us all contracting it also. And, how about this? They get that vaccine. Who knows? It's a first-run vaccine. Like, what are we shooting into our bodies? I don't know. I'm really freaking out about all this. Like, I'm not sleeping well the last 2 nights. Like, oh, well.
No, I hear you.
But, I don't know.
Yeah, it's all, the whole thing's uncharted, so it's, I try to think as practically as I can about this, and it's hard. It's hard to be practical about something that you know so little about personally. So, it's it'll be a whole. I said it'll be different how we're doing things for quite a while. I can only imagine that it's going to be harder for us in the future, even if we do go back to school, if we do go back to work, especially in our industry. We work so closely together. We're so collaborative. There's so many of us close together at any given point. It'll be interesting to see how.
Well, I think
what that translates into.
I think your shows are good to be on in a sense that you are on the lot, and your stages are all set up, and like you're grounded, at a lot. If you didn't have to go on location, or a lot of your locations are on the lot, your shows are pretty equipped for that. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think so too. And also, we've been working together for so long on these shows that if we had to, work in a much more scattered sense, we had to be further away from each other. We had to separate offices. We had to communicate via phone calls instead of in person. I think that fortunately a show like mine that's been running for so long, or shows that have been up and running for so long, we already have our communicative shorthand down to where we know how to do what we're doing. We know how we can, keep the process rolling. So I think for some of those more established shows where the crew has their rhythm down and their pacing down, it might be a bit easier to jump into with some new restrictions than it would be for something just starting up.
Yeah.
When you just start up and your collaboration with the showrunner and with your director and with your DP is pretty intense. It's pretty in person, and it's pretty constant with the communication. But now it's I think we're at a point where we really could be really far removed from each other while still making sure that it worked. Yeah, most of what's going to be starting up, though, is going to be that fresh stuff that requires that collaboration. So.
Oh, I know. I'm in it. I mean, we didn't even start shooting yet. I don't. Yeah. I have no idea. I don't know how they'll do it. I don't know. I do know that hopefully one day there's Taco Bell in our future.
Oh, of course. We're going to make it. Even if it's during the pandemic and we're eating through a face mask, we'll do it.
Yeah. I should say I miss you. I haven't seen you in years, but I miss you. But at least we get to chat every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I love seeing the work that you're doing, because it's always...
And I've always...
so good to see. And they said you won, and it was pretty amazing. And I don't even know myself how to even do something like that. So it's been pretty cool to see, your work, because I remember you were like, I won an Emmy, and I was like, oh, that's cool. How do you do that? I think when you won, because I talked to you kind of around that time, I then looked to see what the process was. And
dude, you're full of shit. You have submitted. There's no way. You guys don't submit?
I never submitted anything. Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know what the I think.
All right.
I think I looked into it once. And
all right, your agent. Guess what?
40.
Your agent better be listening to this podcast right now, and he or she better get on this shit, because that's obscene that the Goldbergs wouldn't submit or schooled. No, someone's you need a helper. Right. You know what you mean? Your art department coordinator should be doing this. I don't know who your coordinator is. They should be on top of this.
I'm gonna call them right now.
Yeah, get on it. Because submissions are due June 5th or something. I already know.
Oh, all right. I'm gonna get on it then.
Well, I mean, at least I haven't had to compete against you then.
Well, I know. It's all now that I know that I need to do it. You're going down this year.
Yeah. I don't have... well, we have a good place. We're submitting... I believe we're going to submit good place. I hope. We'll see.
Oh, you're going to get the pity vote because it's finished.
No, you don't win like that. People are like, it's over. You know what a lot of people do? They I think that won already. I'm not voting for that. Or it's very hard to win two. You know what I mean? Once you won, you probably shouldn't submit anymore. I'm kind of a fan of that. Once you win, you probably shouldn't submit anymore.
Yeah, spread some around for the rest of us.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm kind of okay with that, and then I'm kind of not. Kind of selfish.
What if everything else sucked?
Well, I need another one. I got two boys. I can't leave one behind. What are you up to? Are you working on anything?
Oh, yeah. So I'm, one of the things I'm able to do, film and television, obviously, it's really hard to do during this time. But I'm still able to do a lot of location-based work, because a lot of that work I'm able to do remotely by myself. And one of the big things I've been working on for the past 2 years is rebuilding the Paramount Ranch Western town that burned down in the Woolsey fire.
Oh, wow.
So
great.
I've been working with the National Park Service for the past year or so, designing the new Western town that's going to be put back to the Paramount Ranch for filming. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to keep working on that during the pandemic here, and which is kind of cool. It's obviously a set that is existed, since the 1920s for shooting on, but it's also a place that's open to the public for them to enjoy as well. So it's kind of this cross design between filming location and environmental enjoyment for the community as well.
Oh my God, that's great. So you go out there much? You have to go out there a lot?
Yeah, it's just down, I live just down the street from it, so I'm pretty close by, which is one of the reasons I got involved in it, is because it's such a part of the community here where we live, since I live near the Paramount Ranch.
That's
so
awesome.
I go there, a lot to right now we're still, early on to the kind of pre-design phase of what this should be, because it's with the National Park Service, which now owns the property. It's a very lengthy governmental, process to make anything happen. But it's been really cool to kind of go through the history of what this was and kind of the history of its importance to, the film industry over the past 100 years now. And it's
did Bonanza shoot there?
That's going to be really functional for the future.
Did Bonanza or Bonanza or Rifleman shoot there?
So a lot of those shoes, back in the 50s and 60s, all those westerns, really brought it into kind of its heyday of popularity. And then in the 80s, it became much less, popular, that type of TV show and that kind of western film. So the property ended up being donated by its current owners, the National Park Service. And it kind of was used for small things here and there. Probably the biggest thing it was used for in the 90s was Dr. Quinn shot there. And then recently, before the fire, Westworld was shooting there.
Yeah.
So it kind of served a kind of nice purpose in a kind of recent memory here, but now my goal is to build it in such a way that it's a much more attractive and usable location for filming.
That's awesome, man. Great project.
So yeah, something kind of cool.
You're like building your own back lot.
Yeah, trying to here.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a staple in like Hollywood. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We looked, and the amounts of Western towns that exist now, it's getting smaller and smaller. But a lot of them are, especially those ones up in Santa Clarita, kind of closing down and falling into disrepair. So
yeah, they're bad.
It's going to be nice to kind of have a new. Yeah, I shot one of the Goldbergs this past year, and it was so much work just to even get it kind of shootable. So it'll be good to have one that's kind of built with filming in mind and built with an aesthetic that is kind of camera ready to come into and shoot it. So that's kind of the goal that I'm going for right now.
That's awesome that you have that to do while we're down too. I mean, you've always had that though. It's like, what are you working on? I'm in between shows. I don't care. I got this project going on and working for Disney, and it'd be like, shit, man, I need a job.
Yeah, I know. I always felt like a little spoiled, a little lucky that I'm kind of able to hop back and forth between the two. So.
I really can't imagine carrying on another full-time job while set decorating a show. I don't know how he does it. And he's got 3 kids. 3 gorgeous kids. I mean, I am not kidding. I thought he was a serial killer. I think I pulled over for gas in Flagstaff or something, and then I came to this realization of like, I don't know who this dude is. I mean, it was so naive. I just jumped into the car. I started driving cross country. But it was a great life and work experience that made me grow, so I'm really thankful. And he didn't kill me. And I got a really good friend out of it. And we both have no shame in our love for Taco Bell. So I'm very thankful he was able to do this podcast. I really do love the Goldbergs, and believe me, over the years that I've watched and it's been on, I email him after the episodes and hey, kudos, that was a good one. Thanks for those little Philly details you put in, just trying to call out how appreciative I am of those details. So I'm really glad that he did the interview. I hope you enjoyed that. So here's the thing. I ask all the time at this part of the show for a little review on iTunes, and it's come to my attention that possibly a lot of you have no idea what I'm talking about. So, to the majority of you who are listening on your phone, in the podcast app, if you search Decorating Pages and you select the show, and then scroll down to ratings and reviews, you can just tap that 5 stars. Tippity tap tap, and then maybe, if you got a minute, write a review. And it's pretty much the same on your desktop, your laptop. With Mac, just go to the podcast app and then scroll down. There I am. Reviews and ratings. If you're rocking a PC, I'm sorry. I haven't had that game for a while. I don't know what goes on there, but I'm sure you can figure it out. You're on a PC. I'm sure you can figure it out. So thanks for that. Check out the Decorating Pages YouTube channel and subscribe there to see these little clips of past podcasts that I've been putting to video. If I were you, I'd start with the production designer David Grotman and the little clip that I did of him talking about the color green that he selected for the film Doubt. And again, that YouTube is Decorating Pages channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you're alerted to all the new clips. Coming up in the next month or so, here are the interviews I've lined up. Next week is production designer Tracy Dishman. Then production designer Brian Stonestreet, set decorator Brandy Kalish, set decorator Don Deers. I got a roundtable discussion of the finale of The Good Place with Ian Phillips, Adam Rao, Gabe Perillo, and Graham Radcliffe, and myself. And then editor Jonathan Fisher, who is just going to school us about the editing process. It's so much good stuff. I hope you got an earful. I'm Kim Wanup for Decorating Pages. Father's Day is just around the corner. Give Dad the gift of relaxation. a stogie in the pool. Stogie Floaty Luxury Pool Float. Available now on Amazon, Etsy, and stogiefloaty.com.
Welcome to Pro Tips for the Pros, brought to you by Floor & Decor Bailey's Crossroads. In this series, we'll explore essential advice for professional contractors to deliver outstanding renovation results. Let's dive in. Before starting any renovation project, take the time to plan meticulously. Assess the customer's needs, budget, and timeline to ensure a smooth and successful renovation process. Thank you for joining us for this pro tip on planning thorough renovations. Stay tuned for more expert advice brought to you by Floor & Decor Bailey's Crossroads.
A lot of people tolerate ordinary. Ordinary bathrooms, kitchens, entryways. Well, not on your watch. If you're a pro, you've got a new partner in town. Floor & Decor. From tile to wood to stone, Floor & Decor has more styles and job lot quantities of Schluter, Mapei, Laticrete, and other brands pros trust. Come see a whole new way to wow with Floor & Decor. Coming soon to Bailey's Crossroads.